This is a lesson that covers just the vocabulary from topic 19, which is about angles. And the first word is angle, and we just have to have a definition. I know you know what an angle is, but can you define it? So an angle's definition is a figure formed by two rays with a common endpoint. So we name the angles. We can name this particular angle in 4 different ways. We use the little symbol that looks like a teeny tiny angle to indicate that it's an angle. So that's the symbol for angle. And we can name this angle that is located over here in 4 different ways. So the first way is just with the number. So it's angle 1. We could also name it by just its vertex. So that would be angle B. But if there's more than one angle off of vertex B, then we need to use 3 letters to name it. So it would be angle ABC and angle CBA. Those are all the different ways we can name this angle. Notice that when we do use 3 letters, the middle letter has to be the vertex. And the vertex is the end point of the 2 rays where it meets. And we use degrees to measure angles. And the tool we use to measure is a protractor. So this should all be review. And an acute angle is an angle with the measure between 0 and 90 degrees. So I just want you to draw an example of an angle that has a measurement between 0 and 90 degrees. So here's an example. Most of you would probably put an angle so that one of the rays is horizontal. Doesn't matter how you orient it. Alright, the next one is obtuse angle. And an obtuse angle is an angle with a measure between 90 degrees and 180 degrees. So an example would look like this. So 90 degrees you should know is a right angle. That's the next one. And a right angle is an angle with a measure of 90 degrees. So to indicate that it is 90 degrees, we put a little square in the vertex. So if I draw a right angle, to show that it is 90 degrees, we put a little square in there. So we can orient it any way. So there's another 90 degree angle, and I'm showing it with the little square in the corner. A straight angle is an angle with a measure of 180 degrees. And that just looks like a straight line. So if we have an angle here, so if I have this, angle BAC is 180 degrees. Alright, now we have some more vocab here that probably you haven't learned in the past. All of those you should have been familiar with, but this is maybe new to you. An adjacent angle, or adjacent angles, are 2 angles that have a common ray and a common endpoint, but no interior angles are in common. So when we have a shape like this, and I have angle 1 here and angle 2 here, but I'm going to put some letters in here as well. So I'm going to put X, T, J, and W. So adjacent angles have a common ray, so I'm going to highlight the common ray here. They have that in common. They have the endpoint in common, but they don't have any inside in common. So angle 1 and angle 2 are adjacent angles. And I can name them differently. I can say angle XTJ and angle JTW are adjacent. Now I'm going to show you an example that's not adjacent. So, not angle XTJ and angle XTW. Let me explain why that's not adjacent. XTJ is this angle right here, and XTW is this angle here. And they have all of this stuff in here in common. But the definition of adjacent angles, you're not allowed to have any interior points in common. So that's why those are not adjacent. Alright, let's move to the next page, and we have complementary angles. Complementary angles are two angles whose sum is 90 degrees. So we can have angles that have a measure of 20 degrees, and its complement is an angle that is 70 degrees. Those are complementary angles. You can also show complementary angles as adjacent angles. So if we have a 20-degree angle here, its adjacent complement would make a 90-degree angle. So this would be 70 degrees there. And notice that we have a 90-degree angle right there. So those are complementary angles. Supplementary angles are angles that add to 180 degrees. So an example of that would be an angle that measures 120 degrees, and its supplement would measure 60 degrees. Those are supplementary angles. If we put those two together, here's the 60 and the 120, together they form a 180 degree angle, which is a straight angle. So this last example are supplementary angles that are also adjacent. Now, there are several students who get confused or mix up complementary and supplementary, so I have a silly way to remember it. Complementary starts with a C, and I'm going to make that into a 90. So complementary adds to 90, and 180 has an S for supplement. I'm going to make that into an 8, so that's 180 degrees. So that's just a silly way to remember which one's which. So complementary, you can form 90 degrees out of that, or a 9 out of the C, and supplementary you can form a 180 if you're imaginative there, and that's a way to remember which one's which. Alright, the last vocab word that we have to cover on here is vertical angles, and those are angles that are opposite of each other when you have two intersecting lines. Now, a common misconception with vertical angles is that vertical typically means on top, straight up and down. Vertical angles don't have to be on top of each other. So let me show you two intersecting lines. And then vertical angles are opposite of each other. So if I talk about this angle right here, the angle opposite of it is this one over here. So those are vertical angles. Another pair of vertical angles, this one, and opposite of it is this one. So that's another pair of vertical angles. Let me put some letters on here, and we're going to name these. So A, M, T, P, and S. So angles AMS and TMP are vertical angles. Another pair of vertical angles are angle AMT and angle SMP. So vertical angles are across from each other. It doesn't mean they have to be up and down. They just have to be across from each other with lines that intersect. And that wraps up our vocabulary for topic 19.